Welcome to another edition of Enfield First. This should be a very interesting one. I am grateful that we have Phil Kober from the Board of Ed today to explain some of the 2024 closeout financial statement. Welcome, Phil.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right. So this is great to have you here. I saw some of your email about the financials ending 2024 and the final of how we got to where we were. Can you do some explanation of where we ended up?
Sure. So one of the big things that we read in at our last Board of Ed meeting was our closeout for fiscal year 24 budget. And we went over numbers of what we spent, where we ended up, and how we got to those numbers. So I think the big thing that a lot of people need to realize is, we are only able to close that out due to the help from the town and the town council for giving us that basically free money at the end, where we were able to kind of close out our budget with the $75 million that we were allocated. So when we actually went back and looked at our budget, we had spent probably upwards of approximately $86 million, which is overspending by, roughly $10 million. So when we look at our budget of the $75 million, we were lucky that the extra money we spent, we were able to kind of subtract off of that $86 million to end up back at $75 million. Now, as you're familiar with the town, you guys were fortunate enough to give us $5.6 million. Now, that was money that the Board of Ed actually owned the town. It was for insurance, workman's comp, general liability, and stuff like that. So instead of money going back and forth, we essentially subtracted that from the $86 million to bring our spend down. Now, one of the other things I learned, and only being on the Board of Ed for a year, this was a first full budget cycle where I was able to see it from start to finish, is that the Board of Ed actually does have other revenues and incomes that come in. We get tuition paid from us from Hartford, Suffield, East Windsor, other towns that send students to Enfield, predominantly Eagle Academy for some of the smaller towns, and then Hartford through Open Choice and some of the other programs. So the Board of Ed has this additional income on top of what comes to us from the town council. So through that additional income that came in, we basically reimbursed costs that we had incurred, and now we reduced our budget to close out our year at the $75 million that we were appropriated. So on paper, the Board of Ed was lucky enough to end the year at 100% utilization, no overspend, no underspend, but understanding how we got to that, I think, is a very important part of the equation. And going forward into future fiscal years, we need to be cognizant of how this year happened and then how to prevent this from future years so we're not reaching back out to the town council for additional funds.
I think that's the important thing in the whole thing is how we move forward from this. And when you say the town council gave you the money, I just want to be clear, it's the taxpayers of Enfield that ended up paying that bill. We just moved it we gave the okay that was.
No, that's definitely correct. And yeah, the board does appreciate it because if we didn't have it, we'd have to think of additional means, carryover funds, loans, grants, whatever it is, in order to make that happen.
And it was also my first year on the council too. So going through the budget process is a learning experience for anybody coming on to any board or whatever. You are in charge of a lot of money, and the budget process is a little bit more difficult with the BOE than the town, from what I can see, because it seems to be money comes from all over the place, where we just know where our receipts are.
I think that's the best way of putting it. The Board of Ed has money coming in from a lot of different places, and even when you're sitting on the board, you don't realize it at first. There's the town contribution, which comes through town council, and then there's also the equalization cost sharing that comes from the state. And those are kind of the two biggest pools of money that come in, and that's what we see in our main budget. However, again, it is important to understand that the Board of Ed does have this other money through reimbursements, grants, whether it's at the state, federal level, additional accounts we have through nutrition, student activities, and so forth. So there is a lot of slices of the pie that comes together to make the full pie that would be the whole Board of Ed budget.
And one of the terms I heard the other day was a guaranteed grant or guaranteed income, which scares me because being in business, there was nothing really guaranteed about any grant coming in from the state.
Exactly. So my father used to tell me there's only two things guaranteed in life: death and taxes.
There you go.
If it's not either one of those, it's not guaranteed. So I think some of the misconceptions with guaranteed grants come with the definition of grants and what they are and how they work. So there are maybe two grants that you could say are guaranteed. So the equalization grant that's part of our budget from the state is probably a third of our budget. That comes in. That's written into the state law. There is also another grant that, sure, maybe you can consider a guarantee, is what we call the excess cost. So there's a formula for special needs students that come into our district where we're responsible for the first 4.5% of the per pupil expenditures. And then anything additional to that is reimbursed by the state according to this complicated formula. So normally the state says, we'll give you 100% of anything over that 4.5 times. In recent years, we've learned you never get that 100% because there's so many towns that need it. So that excess cost grant ends up being, 90%, 70%. Now it's approximately 67%. So even believing that it's guaranteed at 100%, you're now erroneously forecasting how much money you're going to get.
So really on that side of it, are you looking for your state reps? Is that something that they're supposed to fight for, more of that percentage? Is that the argument I'm hearing?
That is an argument you're hearing for specifically that excess cost grant. And a lot of people do need to understand what that grant is. Again, it's a complicated formula based off of the per pupil expenditures and then how much you're spending for a special needs student. So in the 2022-2023 school year, the per pupil expenditure for Enfield was approximately $18,000. So for a special needs student, then looking at the excess cost reimbursement, 4.5 times that 18,000 would be about 81,000. So if we have a outplacement for special needs students that's costing us 100,000, we are automatically responsible for that 81,000, no matter what. Now, if that grant reimburses us at 100%, the difference between the 81,000 and the 100,000, we'd be expecting 19,000 to come back to us to reimburse ourselves. Right. Understanding, however, the state, because there's so many school districts that are qualified for this and are looking for this money, there's not enough money in the pot to give everybody that 100%. So we're looking at like 67%. So instead of 19,000, maybe we're only getting 13, 14,000 back. So we've automatically created a deficit where we were expecting 19 and we're only getting 14. So that is an argument that's come up that, the state needs to add more money specifically to this grant pool in order for us to forecast accurately. However, again, it is only a smaller slice of the pie in that, we're talking difference between 14,000, 19,000.
Yep.
Very negligible in the bigger picture of the budget.
So my understanding is the federal tax, is that involved at all? Is that federal money or is that all state money, or is federal pass it to the state and then the state's supposed to reimburse? So
most of our funding is either state or local. The federal funding that we get comes through federal grants that do pass through the state. So there are certain grant programs that come from the federal government that the state gets that ties into our grant money. It's not part of our base budget. However, it does pass through the state. So the state has a system through the state of Connecticut. It's the EGMS is the acronym for it. I forget what it fully stands for. But it's a grant management system where you can see the grants that are coming in and the status and when they're actually dispersed and paid out. And that does show federal grants as well as state grants.
Okay. That's a great point too. So going forward, looking at the financials, is this something that the town's going to be aware of, where you guys are situated, how much money's coming in? Are we behind again? We never want to get in the position we were last year.
Exactly. I think after last year, some of the big takeaways are the lessons learned and what can we do going forward. And I know between council and Board of Ed meetings, some of the things we talked about is quarterly budget updates, and I think those are huge.
Exactly.
I also think on the board side, we have opportunity to maybe make our budget a little clearer, a little more transparent, and a little more realistic. I know there was talk at one point, are we budgeting realistically or optimistically? And I think the consensus has to be we need to budget realistically and transparently. So we need to understand that what money the Board of Ed has coming in and what money the Board of Ed has coming out. And if we're doing at least quarterly updates, if not monthly updates, as we get maybe closer to the end of the fiscal year, I think that's going to be a very important part of getting to the end of this year and making sure we're on track to where we need to be.
Well, I really appreciate the explanation. In the end, we're all looking to do the right thing for the education and the kids. And it comes across as politics get involved, and it really isn't fair. We're trying to do the right thing all the way around. And I appreciate the explanation because the taxpayer is the one that ends up paying this bill. And we're supposed to overlook and oversee that and make sure that's being spent correctly.
Definitely. I think all our elected leaders, whether it's on the board or the council, I think oversight is a huge part of our responsibility. And the numbers are there. The numbers don't lie. So when the politics come in, it's disappointing sometimes because we're all here to make Enfield a better place, teach our students, and give them the best education and services possible.
This has been great. I really appreciate the explanation. I hope that people out there get some kind of oversight of what actually was happening there. It's important. So
definitely. I hope we were able to shed some light.
I hope we have you back again for some more talk about the budget because it is a big topic in town.
All right.
So Enfield first.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
I'm Bob Hendrickson, and I approve this message.